the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, right? And somebody was like, Jesus wants to sit with you in the heart. Yeah. He's not just trying to immediately yank you out. And when friends take that approach too, I think there's so much we can learn from Jesus' example of that.
Welcome to Season 1 of the Nursery Room Podcast, where we talk about our journey of infertility with the goal of helping to facilitate healing, hope, and to help others to not suffer in silence.
All right, so welcome. And this is the Nursery Room Podcast. Today, on this episode, we have some special friends with us.
Yes.
So Jenna and Mason, we met them at a conference that our adoption agency requires us to go to. And that was maybe...
in February?
Yeah, a few months ago. And we kind of hit it off. And thankfully, we actually live close to each other. So we've been able to hang out and stay in touch. So we appreciate you guys taking the time to come and do this.
We're happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
for having us.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah. So we've talked about, me and Emily have talked about our story of infertility. Yeah. And we've talked about that it affects people in different ways. And the reason why we wanted to have Jenna and Mason come on, they've been very supportive of us since we've met them at the adoption conference, but they have their own story. Their story is one that is more so infertility wrapped in with miscarriage. So we thought there would be a lot of value just to hear somebody else talk about what that looks like. So if you guys don't mind, maybe just intro yourself and tell us a little bit about you guys, how you met, and kind of, we'll start there.
Sure. So Jenna and I met, we were both 18 in Florida, and we didn't hit it off immediately, but we kind of reconnected a few years later in college online, actually through Facebook of all places. And we dated long distance. So I was several states away, and we dated long distance for 2 years in college. For one of those 2 years, we were engaged, and then we got married as soon as we could after Jenna graduated, and she moved to where I was at. And we, so that was in 2016. So it was 8 years ago, married for 8 years. And then from there, we made a move several states away about 3 years into our marriage. Several contributing factors, kind of played into it. But the biggest motivator, I think, for us was really wanting to start a family and looking to do that in a place where we knew that we could raise the family the way that we felt called by God to do so. And
Okay.
Anything to add?
No, it was, we just were both in our careers and enjoying it, but I knew that I wanted to be a wife and mother at a young age, and I wanted to have a career too, but what I cared more about was being a wife and mother. And
sounds a lot like me.
Yeah. And we were, once when we made the move, and we're just, that was kind of the catapult for us then. All right, like we're ready to start a family. It was about 3 years into our marriage. So
you're 3 years into your marriage, and then that's kind of when you guys decided that you wanted to start trying to have kids.
Yes, I had been on birth control our whole marriage so far, and I went off of it and kind of gave myself a couple cycles to let my body kind of neutralize. And then in May of 2019, we started trying, and we got pregnant right away. And I think we'll dive more into this later, but to me, it was kind of like, yay, I'm continuing to have all the things I wanted. I wanted to be a teacher, and then I wanted to get married, and I wanted to have kids. And it was a little bit of ignorance and naivety in a way of like, just as I expected, just as I planned,
everything
pride.
was like falling into place, as you said.
Yeah.
Kind of like going along with what you guys talked about in one of your other episodes, just like the illusion a little bit of more control than you actually have over your life. As believers, we ultimately all know that God has control over all the circumstances and all the events that happen in our lives. But I think for us to that point, with graduating college, getting married, you're kind of checking off these like proverbial boxes that society and culture says you need to. And our journey with children and infertility kind of shattered that a little bit, but it grew us a lot as a result, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, do you want to maybe go down that path a little bit? Like after that, so you got pregnant. What happened from there?
Just a few weeks later, it all came crashing down. So got pregnant. And then really, so caveat, we had 4 miscarriages. So this was our first.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we also we were just naive, in a lot of ways. And one, thinking it would happen to us.
Yeah.
2, we were young and had just moved to a place we knew no one. And where we had just moved, it had been living there like a month and a half. And it just started with bleeding. And I hadn't even gotten to have like my first OB appointment yet either. And then it got worse. And got the advice from a friend that like maybe you should just go to the ER, and because if I was pretty early on, so we were kind of concerned it was maybe ectopic pregnancy, which can be really dangerous for the mom, as well. So we went and spent the night in the ER in what felt like a foreign town, and that was just kind of traumatic in its own way. And they were referring to the tissue as products of conception, which just really triggered me in a way, because we believe that life begins at conception.
And then it felt like they were kind of making light of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and so we miscarried, and we had like just told our families we were pregnant, and so then just pretty much days later broke to them that baby was gone,
And you were about like how far along at that point?
That was 6 or 7 weeks. Okay. Yeah. And like I found out before my even missed period, because we were, so like we had known for a couple, maybe 2.5 weeks, something like that. So, but yeah, so that was just crushing, I think, especially to me, because I had wrapped, and you. For you, it was maybe more bewildering. For me, it was crushing. Of just kind of dreams.
Yeah, and having just moved and not really knowing anybody in this new area, I think kind of added a layer of just difficulty to it, because our support network that we had just left behind wasn't able to physically be present for us. So,
and a lot of my good friends who we had left behind were all pregnant. So that was like an extra, all due at the similar time. So that was hard.
It really forced us to rely on God, which is ultimately where our hope is found. But it forced us to rely on each other and on God. Yeah.
So it was mostly just you guys here, like not too many friends, not too many.
Yeah, we'd
family.
only been here for maybe 2 months at that point. It was
I don't
early.
think I had been here for 2 months. Yeah. He had to come a few weeks before me just with the job. But we had started attending a church, but had only met a couple people at that point. But that was actually another God thing, because one of the couples, he was on staff at our church. They were one of the few people that we had numbers for, and they had experienced several miscarriages, and they were like a lifeline to us, not just like in every single miscarriage and every single season of life. They've continued to be just like amazing. So that was like God's provision right there. He was like, you're not alone.
Yeah, and the timing of the friendship was really special too. Like she shared even a few weeks ago in talking that they were walking out of a season that we were walking into.
Wow.
And so there was so much that was fresh to them still that they could share with us. And, even just reaching out and texting and saying, hey, I'm praying for you. I know I can't fix this for you. I can't make it better, but know that I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. I care, that kind of stuff went a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then that's miscarriage number 1. What does miscarriage number 2 look like, and how far after the first, how much time had gone past the first one that the second one happened?
Number 2 happened in September of the same year, so a few months had passed.
Yeah.
So you guys immediately went back to trying again
pretty
quickly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wouldn't I think I gave, again, wanted to just kind of give my body a little bit, and we were grieving, but then in some ways it almost lit this fire in me more of I really want to get pregnant,
Yeah, you don't know how long
and
this
everybody
could take.
tells you a lot of people miscarry, that happened, you were so early, and doctors are there's nothing that could have at that point, because they're like, this happens a lot, and some people don't even know, if they didn't, it's that type of thing. So it was in September. This one was one of our earliest. It was like just a bit into I think it was like 5.5 weeks. Again, I knew really early because I was so in tune with my body.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of one of those things too, where, so all of our miscarriages were in the first trimester, and it's like this weird, like, yes, I'm thankful that if they were going to happen, that they happened, but it also doesn't like negate the fact that it was a loss of a child, and for 2 of the 4, we had already had ultrasounds, heard heartbeat, all of those things. So, we were connected from the start, probably even me a little bit more so than you at the beginning, but then almost the loss almost like magnifies the connection that you feel in a way. So that one was pretty early. I was working and happened at work, and I had to keep working through it.
So you continued to work afterwards?
Yes, it was because it was early. It wasn't as like violent, I would say. But like for miscarriage, for some people, like they don't know, and a doctor has to tell them that the baby's passed. For us, my body, it was like a blessing and a curse that like I hated the fact that my body was like good at miscarrying in a way. Like it like it would start the process, it would be violent, things would always clear out as they like I never had to have a DNC or take a pill, which sometimes that has to happen, which like I was thankful for, but also when it came to like how I viewed myself as a woman and like my body, that was hard. So
like something's not working right.
Yes. And like, why is my body good at losing babies and not sustaining babies? Those just like thoughts get to your head. So that one was just kind of like, whoa. So
that's a tough spot to be in too, because in the world of infertility, it's not until you hit your 3rd miscarriage that they consider you a recurrent miscarriage, patient, I guess. And that's when they would forward you or refer you to a specialist to get some testing done to see, hey, is there something genetically going on that's causing this? Is there something, in your situation, your environment with your own health right now that's causing this? So at that point, every time we would go in for a miscarriage or, check up after the miscarriage, they'll show you this chart, and it's like ingrained in my head, like, what age you're at, how many miscarriages you've had, and then essentially the chance that you have of sustaining a healthy pregnancy next time. So that was almost kind of like,
they were really high for the first two.
93%, it's 90%, it's 88%, so they're looking at it and they're telling you, hey, barring something major that we haven't been able to test for and we're not going to test for yet, you should be good next time. So you're kind of clinging on to that hope at the same time as you're dealing with this grief and pain of like, this is not what we hoped it would be. This is painful, this is difficult. But that was a tough spot.
And like, especially for people, like sometimes it would seem like people felt like this like sigh of relief when we told them that the miscarriage happened in the first trimester, because like obviously that's the most common time. Yes, they were early. Yes, like, I think it's tragic no matter what time it happens. It can be even more, sometimes more traumatic later on. And I'm saying that from having early miscarriages, so I can't even imagine what some of my friends have had to go through with, stillborns, and things like that. But that was sometimes hard too, because people try to quantify your loss and quantify your grief because it makes them feel better.
Right. Which at the end of the day, it's like a loss of a child, whether it's, you're a few weeks pregnant, whether you're 8 months pregnant, or whether you've delivered your baby and something's happened, like it's your child and you're growing that child in your womb. So you're attached like right away.
Which kind of, Tony, leads us into our 3rd miscarriage. That happened in March of 2020, which we all know March of 2020 was a rough time.
It's a rough month for everybody.
We kind of knew something was up because I had actually been bleeding for a couple weeks, but at the same time would go in for an ultrasound and we would see the heart beating and they would say like, it still looks okay, that type of thing. But I think in our heads we knew, just because of the past. But that was like 9 weeks which was
A little further
actually
along.
the furthest we had made it. So we almost had a little bit of like fall. Every time that we would hit a date that passed a previous miscarriage with subsequent pregnancies was like a little sigh of relief,
Yeah.
But we were, I mean, the bleeding was happening, but nothing major.
So there was still a heartbeat.
Even with some bleeding, there was still
Even
a
with a
heartbeat.
heartbeat.
Yeah, and we
Okay.
saw the heart fluttering on the ultrasound and everything.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, March 13th, that night, or actually I guess March 12th, and then the night was really gruesome. And this one was probably one of the more traumatic ones because it's kind of rare for this to happen in the first trimester, just from what I've heard from other friends. But the baby actually came out, but like stayed in the little gestational sac, and I scooped it out of the toilet, and we actually got to hold like the little baby in our hand. Like the gestational sac was kind of see-through, so we saw their perfectly formed, just like the apps look like at 9 weeks.
Yeah.
So at 9 weeks, what were you able to see? Like, do you see a head or
Yeah,
like,
we
do
saw
you see
head. They didn't
The
have.
eyes.
We thought
eyes
it was
on
a
both
boy, so we'll
sides.
probably end up referring to him as he. But
Yeah.
Okay.
You see the spinal
eyes,
cord
little-
in the eyes. Yeah.
there's this. I don't really have because it was translucent. But like we watched the whole, we could see the spine and little
The
like
whole-
vessels and the little
yeah.
webbed fingers and hands.
The
and
whole
everything.
sack was maybe an inch.
Yeah, I
and a
mean,
half.
it was.
It was
the
it was
sack
small,
was that
but
big.
you could see like fearfully and wonderfully made. There it is. It was like
At
almost
9 weeks.
it's gut wrenching, right? Because like you're not supposed to see your child that soon, but
Right.
it also was like miraculous to see your child. Like wow, like look what God allowed us to create. Like you're not supposed to be here yet, buddy, but there was some. I don't know. There was some cool in that, even though we lost him, that we got, or him or her, we got to see it. See him or her too. Yeah.
He buried him, and we planted a tree. So there was like some nice pieces of just like that we didn't have with the other
Right.
two at that
Right,
point.
yeah.
And like kind of that tree, what didn't really to us stand for just him at that point. It stood for all three.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The evergreen.
But and then like the next day was when our state pretty much the shutdown began for COVID. So that
Wow.
pretty lonely.
I was gonna
Almost
say
felt like round 2 of the first miscarriage, where we were craving community and maybe not people coming over constantly, but everyone's being told to stay home. And
We had good friends in our families and community, that supported us as much
Yeah,
as they
for
could.
sure.
But
the
to just
timing
kind of
was
be
hard.
shut. And then I had to become an online teacher by Monday. It was just crazy.
wow.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's really hard.
So I guess at that point, looking at kind of just the 3 of those miscarriages that y'all had experienced, how were y'all doing individually? How was like your marriage doing at that point? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a lot
Depends
to...
what aspect of the marriage you're
Yeah.
talking about.
And I always said that, and I've said this to people that I've talked to who have like come to me while going through miscarriage. It's like on the days of like, and like the days around our miscarriage, it was like I had never felt so like one with him, because like nobody else in the world can understand in this exact moment, or like he's as close, I'm as close as he that can understand, and vice versa. So like that oneness of just like being in the trenches together, but then also like grief does things to marriage, and how you handle, like you grieve differently, the anger you feel, questioning God, things like that. So it like, and I think because we didn't have any family around, we did have good friends, community, and our family still supported us from afar and would come. But overall, and in the end, it definitely matured us and grew us closer together. But I'm not going to say that miscarriage is not hard on your marriage. It's very hard on marriage.
Yeah,
Multiple aspects.
sure. Yeah.
Is there any way that like y'all were trying to deal with it yourselves, but also support the other person, or ways that you feel like I didn't do a good job supporting my spouse in this kind of way? Because I know when we talked about our story, like, every month when she got that reminder, for me, it was a little easier to just be like, all right, like we got to keep going. It was hard for me,
Yeah.
to hear that and like, no, like I know like what's going on right now, and like try to like almost like take her mind off of that and like, all right, let's go do this or let's go do that. And I probably could have like sat with her a little better in that moment.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to dealing with it in a similar way to you. I think, there's ample opportunity on both sides to show grace, right? Because the grief is the loss is the same, but the grief is different, and how you deal with the grief is different. So for me, I'd have a burst of tears and then I'd want to be busy doing something to take my mind off of it. And for Jenna, I think it was a little more of, it's physical for the woman. So you can't escape what's happening to your body for the days and weeks following it. And so there's not really a, busy myself to get away from this pain for a little while for them. And for me, I think there were days, where I did a good job of just sitting with her in that pain. And then there were days where I wasn't as gracious and as loving as I should have been. And I think, that's part of the difficulty of being, two flesh or two people united as one flesh. You're starting to see what the Bible's talking about when it talks about marriage and becoming one. Like there's some forging that happens in those difficult places that you can't get anywhere else. So
yeah, I think I tend to be somebody who like holds it in, bottles it up, and then like explodes. And I think the miscarriage has helped me learn that, especially in marriage, is really not helpful. It's not that I'm mad that he didn't take out the trash. It's that I'm mad that I have 3 dead babies, or just things like, but like him maybe not taking out the trash was the tipping point, or just something. And then I think just that constant thing that you need to remember that you are a team and like the other person is not the enemy. And like, I think I often felt like it was my fault that thought something was wrong with me, and he never once made me feel that way. And that like, and I care a lot, like I'm a people pleaser. So like if he had ever at one time made me feel that way, that literally would have crushed my soul. So I appreciated that so much about him. But also something that kind of helped me when I was struggling to like put into words how I was feeling. There's a book I read and I highlighted or like took notes next to things that were like, I could have written that like could have come out of my mouth that really showed how I was feeling at different times. And when I was like really in just struggling, I like handed him the book and I was like, I'm not able to verbally like share with you all like the nitty gritty, like look through this. And he was like, thank you so much for, and it sparked great conversation. Yeah. And I almost think it was like a tipping point of us becoming better communicators and not waiting so long to like see how the other person was, if that makes sense. And like, I'm sure you guys experience it too. Like it affects sex and that intimacy aspect of, I mean, I know you shared sometimes you were like, so if we have sex, like, what if she does get pregnant? Then I'm going to make her experience another miscarriage. Like, the
innocent, fun aspect to this wonderful thing that God designed just kind of feels like it's almost kind of flushed down the toilet. Like, well, when this happens, like I'm a logical thinker, so I'm thinking step A leads to step B leads to step C. And, 2, 3, 4 times now in the last 12, 18 months, this is where that's gone. Do we really, it just kind of... Because
we were getting pregnant, we just weren't staying pregnant. And,
and anybody who's gone through grief of any kind, not just miscarriages, can probably relate to, that aspect of your marriage is probably one of the easiest and first ones that can get really out of whack,
Yeah, that's really hard. Because I know even for us when we were trying and stuff, it was like, all right, it's time to have sex. It's time, and so that's really difficult.
I too got a little narrow focused on that.
Yeah. And then knowing it, that can, if you have sex, this can lead to pregnancy, which can lead to miscarriage. That's almost like fear, I think, can start to take over.
There's almost a little bit of like a PTSD that kind of, just thinking through like, all right, this is going to lead, and it doesn't mean that it's going to, but your mind almost gets triggered by some of that stuff.
Is there any point that you maybe even considered maybe we needed to go back on birth control and like we need to not be trying to have kids?
No. And if anything, like we knew that we would have to open ourselves up to being okay with more, especially at this, we were 0 for 3 and then we eventually were 0 for 4 after doing a bunch of fertility testing. But for us, it almost more like strengthened, I don't know if strengthen's the right word, but more that like we didn't want to prohibit. And I mean, sometimes like right after a miscarriage, we would in more natural ways, make sure just so that we could have some time to process. But no, I guess we didn't. Which led into our whole adoption thing. Well,
even before we get to that, something I think we even talked about is, are there things that people said to you guys that were helpful? And were there things that were kind of almost like, I don't want to say like ignorant, but just like they had like good intention.
Yes.
But just was like, that's not like really what we need to
After
hear.
miscarriage.
Yeah, and maybe this is not even accurate, kind of the statement that you're making. Like, do you remember anything? And even in a way to like, I'll let you do it with that.
Jenna
I
definitely
probably heard a
has.
lot more than you did.
Yeah.
Just because a lot more women would talk. Men would be like, "Oh man, I'm sorry,"
Yeah.
But unless they had gone through it or if they were verbally able to process, But what you said, I think a lot of people have good intentions, but don't know what to say. And maybe instead of just saying nothing, said more things,
Yeah.
I think I kind of mentioned earlier, kind of trying to like quantify your grief of how, and even like as our number kept ticking higher, then people were like, "Oh man," and just different things
Afraid
like
to say
that.
anything.
Yes, or like the amount of people that would like, "Do you think you guys are just stressed?" Like,
I love that.
I can play it, but like at this point, just different things. But like I said, I think a lot of people, like nobody, I think, said anything to us in malice, but just lack of understanding or knowledge, or sometimes there's times where you should just sit and be quiet and let that person talk first.
Yeah. Is there anything that you, now being in a place that you're now looking back, you feel like this is what I needed somebody to say to me, whether I wanted to hear it or not? This is what I needed to hear, and what you would even say to somebody who was dealing with miscarriage?
It's a great question.
I feel like,
some of the things that helped just on a physical level immediately after the pregnancy losses, we had some really good friends that we shared a little bit about already, that they had been through it. So they understood, they may not really want to talk about it a lot in the first few days or weeks right after it. They're kind of processing through it, but not saying, "Hey, what can I do to help?" or "Let me know if you need any help." Just saying, "Hey, I'm going to bring you dinner tonight. Would you rather have Chipotle or Chick-fil-A?"
That's good.
Just hop into action. Like, you're friends with that person because you already know them pretty well. So take what you do know about them and bless them, right? Because that's the type of thing that when you're going through the grief, the last thing you want to do is chop up chicken and cook dinner, right? Like,
Right.
So things like that were really helpful at the beginning. And then, as far as people's words, immediately just saying, "Hey, I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. Like, I'm thinking about you. We're with you in it," like that. Just what the body of Christ is for. But then as time went on, reminding, don't sit there and wallow in it. Like, God is still good. He still has a plan. This is a part of that. This is not a detour from that. Being reminded of those truths was helpful.
something that helped me that a friend said was our family and friends were overall really amazing. But I had a friend that she had been in the story of Lazarus in the Bible, the women come and tell Jesus, like, it's too late, like, he's gone. And Jesus isn't like, guys, I'm going to raise him from the dead. The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, right? And somebody was like, Jesus wants to sit with you in the heart.
Yeah.
He's not just trying to immediately yank you out. And when friends take that approach too, I think there's so much we can learn from Jesus's example of that.
Yeah.
While like it is nice when you tell me that they're in heaven, and I know that they're in heaven, and I know I have a big family in heaven for eternity, which I'm like incredibly blessed to know that I have a big family waiting for us in heaven to worship the Lord together, you know. But just that, first of all, that Jesus was sitting in the hard with me, and then for friends to take that model too is like probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So sit with your friends.
Yeah.
Sit with your family. Weep with them. Cry with them.
Yeah.
It's okay to sit in the silence. And it's okay not to have the answers in those moments, you know?
Yes.
Yep. Or cook for them and then sit with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
And then get them out of the house and take them disc golfing or take them outside, right? Like,
Need a guy
there are
to take 'em
days
disc
where
golfing.
you do just need to say, hey, man, like, I know this probably hasn't been on your mind for a while, but let's get outside and do something that you love, because I know that would be good for you, you know?
Yeah.
And I think men forget quicker that a man might be struggling with that than women forget that a woman might still be struggling with the miscarriage. So
Yeah. Probably back to there's that physical representation that I'm sure a miscarriage probably lasts. You know, I've got my period a million times, but like with a miscarriage, that I think the bleeding continues for a while, right?
yeah, and periods became very triggering for me. Every month it was like a remember that how that miscarriage felt?
Yeah.
Seeing the blood, seeing, you know, things like that became triggering.
The cramps and everything.
Yeah. The cramp, all of that. So
Yeah.
Oh, well, before we even go to the next thing, because I think the girls wanted to hear this, is even with you, Mason, how was this whole miscarriage thing for you, just as like a guy? On your side, how were you kind of dealing and seeing all of this go down?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I mean, it initially, they're all hard. All the losses are hard because we believe that life begins at conception. So every time there's a positive pregnancy test and there's a loss, like there's a life there. But for me, not having the baby physically in my body and changing it, the pregnancies that were further along, and specifically the third one where we actually had seen an ultrasound and we had held the baby in our hands, like that one rocked me a lot more than the other three did. So, I mean, I think the hardest part really is just for the guy, you're dealing with your own pain, but you're also helpless to really take away your wife's pain. You know, she's got physical pain, she's got emotional pain, she's questioning, you know, God's character in those moments, just like we see in the Psalms, right? Like, God's big enough to handle your questions and your doubts, just don't stay there, right? The psalmist always moves on past that. So that's the goal, right? But as the spiritual leader of your home, you know, it's hard to do that when you're dealing with your own pain and difficulty, in that it's not like your spouse is just walking through this and you're helping hold their hand, like you're in that pit too, trying to climb your way out. But yeah, I think for me, you know, a lot of just learning that we grieve differently and learning that it's okay if there's a day where, she doesn't want to leave the bedroom for 6 or 8 hours and she just needs to sit there and read or sing or sleep. You know, it's okay. Like, let her take the time she needs to take. It's not on me that she's grieving, right? Like, that's a healthy, natural process, not something I have to jump in and try to like fix, you know? And that was probably something that took me a while to really learn, and I'm probably still learning it, but
the fact that you couldn't fix it.
Right. You can't, right? You're powerless to. So, you know, going back to how Jesus just sat there in the difficult situation with them before revealing what his plan was, you know, there's a lot to be learned from that.
I think even like how we were calling like friends and people we know and family, that just like sometimes you got to just sit and be uncomfortable. Probably like for guys kind of dealing with infertility, it's not the easiest thing. It's like, I got to do something. I need to do something. But it's like, well, maybe
Our
I
yard
need
looked
to go.
impeccable.
Yeah.
Right.
The grass looks good.
The grass was in great shape.
Yeah.
And
it does, like, you know, there's so much conversation about the, you know, worth of a woman and being able to carry a baby full term, but guys deal with that too. Like, you have the thought of, well, maybe it is something with me. Maybe what I'm passing along isn't the right stuff. It isn't getting it done. And there's a little bit of a bit of just, I don't know what the word is really, but
questioning.
Yeah, just
when really you're married, it's not one or the other person.
Right.
no,
and it's
no,
God's
no.
plan from the get-go.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. That was probably even like when you talked about like some of the lies you might tell yourselves. I know we used to look at each other and like, well, like it's my fault, like if it wasn't for me. So like, I'm like, oh, why are you crying? Because like, and in a way, maybe it could be tough because like if a couple is feeling that way, it's like, if she's crying, then I'm like, are you more sad because like you're not pregnant? Are you upset with me because it's because of me you can't be, pregnant? Or like vice versa. Like, is she thinking like, well, man, like I can't have a child for you because of me? So just like, I think that's something that we have to learn to like stay away from and like fight that and shut that down from the start.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fertility testing state, because we then went into, they're like, you've had 3 now. Let's go into fertility testing. Refer you, that was a hard piece. Every time waiting for every result to come back of like, will it be me? Will it?
Whose fault
That's not
is
how it is,
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you had those miscarriages, and then this is the saying around the church: as soon as you guys adopt, then you'll get pregnant. So you move into.
So you had 4, but
yeah,
there was
you have
fourth
one more after the third when you have your 4th one.
Yes. So we did, after the 3rd, we did a lot of fertility testing, and they never really found anything. They like tried to grasp at maybe PCOS, tried to grasp at maybe a blood thing, but really it was nothing. They had me try going on metformin as if maybe, because I think sometimes they use that for PCOS, even though I didn't have the signs of it. Then we did 2 months where they tried me on Femera. It's different than Clomid, but it does do something with maybe trying to just make your ovulation better, I guess. But I had this crazy like reaction to it, and like my whole body like basically was just like, we're done.
Really?
And it was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for us of just like our intensity with trying. And in some ways I felt like God was just like, when are you gonna stop trying to do this on your own? In a way. And then we did get pregnant one more time, and again had an early loss. And I can't remember if that was before the Femera or after. But so, and then we pretty much had a year of, we weren't prohibiting for a while. We were trying really intensely, but God was also switching our hearts to feeling a call to adoption as well. Never stopped prohibiting, but and again, we just did a lot of healing during that year too, growing and strengthening our marriage. And really, adoption was something that even when we were dating, we were both actually like, oh, is like adoption something you'd be open to? And I remember saying like, well, like both of us were like, yes, but I think we both also thought like maybe we would have biological kids too. But like both of us, it wasn't like I would never adopt. We were both like, yes, I would be open to adoption if God called us to that. And that just that thought kind of started growing. And I really wanted, for me more than you, I really wanted to make sure that like I was at peace with not having biological children before entering into adoption, so that I did not put any, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not pressure, but
trying
just
to fill a void.
Or onto our child, who would be our adopted child.
Yeah,
because of
like
things
second best.
Yes, because of things that I had not worked through. So I was like, and I think you maybe got there a little bit quicker. He's a little more
initially.
Yes,
there was
and then when I was all in, he was like, "Oh wait, we're doing this."
You were almost like my safety net of, I can say that I'm ready for this, but as long as Jenna's not, we're not actually stepping into it. And then I guess it was spring of 2021 when you really were, you were listening to podcasts and you were reading articles and you started researching agencies. And I was like, whoa, like
Wait
pump,
till you-
almost like pump the brakes. Like, let's talk about this, and you're like, we've been talking about it. We've been praying about it. And
I've been praying for
it
peace.
was really
He gave
just,
me peace.
it was really
It's
just me being stubborn for a couple weeks there. And I remember we finally just had a really good discussion about it. Obviously led to tears on both ends, but it was really needed. And that was really a surrender to this is something God is calling us to. He's laid it on our hearts. He's brought it up over and over again. And we're going to step into it in faith, not knowing what it's going to look like, but we're going to move forward with it.
Like not only did he give us peace, but he also gave us like a joy and an excitement and like all in.
And it
like
it didn't feel like a second best. It felt like
No.
this is God's plan A for us to have children, like it was cool.
And back
Really
to
cool.
what you said of adoption. So yes, we started the adoption process. Literally, that was all we were thinking about. We could not be more excited. We were just overjoyed, felt like God had given us such a clear answer. This is what he wanted for us. And we were like a month into our home study. And I was like, I think I was supposed to have a period.
Oh my gosh.
And like I said, I was not taking a single supplement. We were not tracking anything. We were not trying. I mean, but
All the things that you think you need to be doing in order to...
just nothing, no thought in our mind, and it's sad, but I went and I bought a pregnancy test just like, is this really, and I took it and it was like immediately positive.
The boldest,
which I'd seen it 4 times at this point and knew for me how that ended. And so really I was upset almost in a way. I came down, there was no cute, we're pregnant,
Yeah.
It was, are you kidding me? Like God, like we thought like you clearly called us to this. Yeah. We are so excited. We have so much peace for the first time in forever. Yeah. Like, what do you want a 5th miscarriage to be a part of this?
Yeah.
And
our agency that we were going through with adoption was really intentional about wanting to talk through like the healing process of the losses and making sure like you guys are really ready to move on, like you said. And so we're kind of thinking this is going to be a 5th loss and it's probably going to jeopardize or push out the possibility of adopting. And so it almost felt like now adoption's, potentially going to be put on hold because of trying to heal with and deal with the pain and difficulty of this
before we can resume adoption.
Yeah. And,
because they do have you.
But at the same time, we felt strongly that, if God had it on our hearts to say, hey, we surrender like this area of our lives, having children, whether you want us to adopt or have them biologically, we felt strongly that we shouldn't prevent getting pregnant. Because, if you're surrendering, to me, that's
in all areas.
That's a fully open hand, right? Like if you're still trying to control or grasp at something, then it's not really a true surrender, but more of a partial surrender. And that's just the place that God led us to specifically in that situation. And I'm grateful that he did. But it made for a lot of ups and downs.
And we did carry that pregnancy to full term, and we have a 2-year-old son now.
Wow.
And you mentioned the whole people are like, I know so many people who get pregnant after they adopt. And I was that still
a little triggering.
Makes me upset when people, again, that the whole piece of good intentions. But to me, that screams like, so you think adoption's second best, or you thought for us adoption was second best? Because it was never second best for us.
Once you adopt, you'll get pregnant.
Yeah. And I was just like, no, that's not, if you knew our hearts in that, no, or people that were like, you just had to stop being stressed about it. And I'm like, so my stress led to, thank you. So it was my,
right. So it's your fault.
And it directs your mind back to, well, if I do something just right, then it'll work, right? Like when that's what all of the scientific stuff felt like, like we're on the outer limit of what they know about fertility. We're doing all these different random tests that different doctors that we've talked to over the years don't even agree on if that test should be done or not, let alone treating something based on a result of that test.
Yes.
And then, with saying things like, once you try to adopt, then you get pregnant. It keeps that ball in that same court, which is, I've got to do something in order for this to happen. And God had really brought us to a place of, I'm going to get the glory. Whether you adopt a child or whether you have a biological child, it's my doing, and I'm the one that makes that happen.
Not because of your pride.
Yeah, and I think that was really the lesson that we learned through all that, which is really cool.
And another thing that I think that God taught us was, every day felt like I can't believe we're still pregnant. And we were in our adoption home study for a part of that. Our agency let us continue a little bit longer than they normally let their families continue before putting them on hold because of our history. And I was like, can you please not pause this yet? Like, we're probably going to miscarry. I do not want adoption to get held up, and they were amazing working with us.
They were.
They let us actually, we slowed down the process, but they let us not go on hold until our anatomy scan at 20 weeks. And so I think something that God taught me too is just holding, every night I would pray with my hands physically open of just that, this life is yours. You've taught me that. And it's really scary to hold an open hand when he's taken them for 4 times. But I feel like that's what God wanted, and just what he was saying of the life is not ours. It's not ours to create, and it's not ours to take. It's if he blesses us with it, adopted or biological, it is just a gift.
Yeah. He gets the glory, not us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think going through that kind of stuff, it really is a time where you really have to trust and live with open hands. Cause I remember I thought that I had even with us, just over the many years of trying, you pray about it, you might ask why, but then even just the thought of if God wanted us to be pregnant right now, literally
he can do it.
He could do it.
Yes.
But that's not what it was. And it's just more so you have to focus on how am I trusting in God? What is he showing me? And just how am I growing and what am I dependent on? What am I here to do?
Yeah.
But it can be hard to think, through those things. Like I said, if even just going back to things if God wanted, if he would allow, it could happen. But then also I think knowing that he has the ability to do that was also an encouragement of okay, we're right where he wants us to be, because he is in control of all of these things.
Yeah.
So we can know that we can continue to move forward and continue to trust and know that we were talking about, even with y'all, it's the song, Good Plans, by Red Rock. It's it's called Good Plans, not Our Plans.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
not
about,
always clear to me plans.
And I couldn't sing any song that talked about God being good for a period of my, when it was in the heart, which was, that was my heart, but God had to bring it, because I was I don't know how any good is going to come out of it. I couldn't see the good that could come out of it.
And that's the other thing, speaking on that, we can only see what's right, maybe right in front of us, but we can't see down the road. We don't know what the Lord is protecting us from. We don't know, if we didn't trust him in this, who knows what the future holds, I think that he wants us, he can see the entire picture we see right here.
Yeah.
And so I want to trust him in that.
A couple in our church who we turned to a lot when we were praying about adoption, and they adopted 2 children when they were young that are in their teens now, so they can, have some of that perspective. And we turned to them to counsel a lot. And one time we were out to dinner, one of the things that he said with tears in his eyes, and they had a long season of infertility, countless miscarriages, just with tears on his eyes said I would go through all of that if that led me to these children that God wanted me to have on this earth,
Yeah.
And just that piece of we only can see so far in front and
Right.
God can see the whole picture, and just finding comfort and peace in that. Not saying it is not hard.
Yeah.
In the moment, it was hard for me. But
Wow.
You definitely grow because I think we talked about this a while ago. A thought is like, what is it that we're praying and what are we trusting God to do? Because what if God answering our prayers means we don't get what we want? Like we get what we need, but maybe that means we don't get the thing that we want. And I think like it helps me to reshape like what is it that I'm like praying about, and like in what ways am I trusting God to like fully guide me and put me where I need to be. So yeah, I don't know. That's a tough thing to like balance, but I think we've grown kind of like wrestling back and forth like with that.
Because I think we think we know ourselves so well. So we're like, I know I'd be a good mom, and I know I'd, whatever. But again,
or why did God think everybody else should? It can feel like, why did God think everybody else should have that but me? Or,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I guess on the other side, we've talked about this, is that, God gives good gifts, but not everybody gets the same gift.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's also helped us. And just, he changes our hearts. Because like I said, a year ago, I would have never thought we'd be adopting. And like I said, you wouldn't be able to tell from this set, but this room is filled with like
With
the
baby
stuff
stuff in the corners.
for the child that like we're waiting for. That like I'm like fully happy to spoil and buy all the tech stuff that
we wouldn't have met you if
we
it
wouldn't have
hadn't
met
been
y'all.
for Miscarriages.
As time goes on, you see more
Yeah.
and more evidence for what God was doing and what he's teaching us and what he's going to use it for that we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah.
We're a couple years out and we can already say we've seen a lot, but there's more, So,
Yeah.
So I guess it was a big segue off of the original thing. So, so y'all
Sorry.
you decided to adopt, and then you did get pregnant. And then again, that's not everybody's story, because we decided to adopt too, and we're not
pregnant.
So,
Yes.
But so you do that, you end up having your awesome son. We've got to hang out with
Who is so
him.
cute.
Who's in love with you guys?
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so you do have him, and then you resume your adoption process.
We did.
So God called you a second time.
Yes, we prayed about it a really long time. I think we came to peace with it even quicker this time, just because of what we had learned last time, and kind of what you literally just said. I was just like, God, like, I know that your will is just the place I want to be, even if it's maybe not originally what I would like. So I was like, I do not care what you want us to do. Just please let me know, make it clear what you want. And we were all in.
Yeah.
And we were pretty united in the decision after praying a while, and we decided to pick back up. One of the weeks that we were really kind of resuming the process, we had like 3 big prayer requests. One was financial. One was regarding getting into that conference. And actually, the third one was financial too. And God answered all 3. And it was just such confirmation, we thought, to us, to our families, the people who supported us, of like, wow, like God is like moving fast and quick, and he's clearly in this. And again, a little bit into our home study update. Somehow, only God how, we were pregnant. And again, I was like, because it was not on my mind.
Right.
I was like, was I supposed to have a period? And I the apps, and I went and found an app and was like, when was the last start date?
Am I forgetting something?
Trying to remember, figured it out, plugged it in, and it was like, you're on day 2 or 3 of your period. And I was like, I'm not.
No, I'm not.
So we again, we finished our home study. Again, they let us continue a bit. And we are currently 22 weeks with a girl. And just I don't know. Again, I just think it's, sometimes I cringe to say it because, like you said, that is not everyone's story. That was not our this clearly was not our intention.
That's how we met you guys.
Yes. And again, we were just kind of like, God, like, why did you have us start this all up again? We just put in more money, more time, more, all of those pieces. We were so excited. And just even the unique factor that we are with an agency that does require you to go on hold, doesn't give you an option if you want to continue or not, which the more I learned why, the more I understood and respected. And so I think for me, probably more than you, God just needed to remind me that my life is his and it's going to be in his timing, in his way, with his trials and with his blessings. And, I just needed to realize that and just surrender to that.
Just be obedient.
Yeah.
But also know, like you said, with that obedience, it doesn't necessarily mean that God's going to give me what I want because I was obedient.
Yeah.
He's going to give you what you need, like you said. Like that song, I will take heart in deserts and gardens. Sometimes it means you're in the desert for a period of time. And the garden, one day is heaven. That's ultimately where the garden is. And we see so many examples in scripture of, like the hall of faith in Hebrews 11, where like they didn't see, what that next thing was until they passed into eternity, and now they're with the Lord, and it's a blessing that we get to experience some of those lovely things that he can do here and now, but there's not the promise that we're going to see all that this side of eternity too. So that'd be a big piece of encouragement from me to anyone that's in the middle of that season, whether you have a biological child or don't, whether you adopt or don't, like this is a much longer thing than we think it is, right? Like it's about God's plan and God's glory, and one day it's going to make a lot more sense and we'll be with him forever. So that perspective it's just something that helps.
It's not a
keep me grounded.
Comparison game because we could both be like, oh, we've both dealt with infertility, and like somebody in our shoes could like, well, like you guys got to have like
y'all won.
Y'all got what you wanted,
a child, but it's not anything about that. And I think for us, like we're pretty settled in that like we're doing the adoption thing, but there's not like all right, well, I know we'll get pregnant after that, or like one day we'll have a child biologically, like whether that happens or not, like God is still good, and like the same for y'all, like we will experience different things from each other. You can't compare with each other, but like at the end of the day, like it is our own journeys, and God is doing something different in all of our lives. And
I just love how God like even brought us together. Like we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but like he brought us together because of our adoption agencies. Like you guys were newly pregnant, but like because of so many miscarriages, they allowed you guys to still go to a conference. And for us, we were going, we were all going because of adoption, but it was like God still just is going, a little different directions, but like he brought us together, and honestly, Jenna and Mason, you guys have been like incredible supporters for us, like just on this journey. Like it's not easy. I mean, Jenna and Mason like have been people that we go to and we share things that like we're struggling with and things that are hard, but like they pray for us, and we also go to them also because you guys have been there and you do understand, and like God is kind the way he like weaves people's paths together in different seasons, and like knows exactly what we need in those seasons.
Yeah. And I think even the encouragement out of that is like which we said is find people who, one, that care about you, but also it is nice to find people who are in similar situations
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we wanted to start this podcast and do this. So it would encourage people to just start having conversations, because I think we have gotten a lot of like relief and a lot of encouragement from being able to have conversations with y'all. And I mean, we hadn't known y'all more than 6 months. It's less than 6 months.
Yeah.
But because of even the things that you guys have dealt with and we've dealt with, like we were able to connect, in a way that we might not get to do that with other people.
That could take years to get to that level of intimacy of conversation. It was like, I think almost the immediate connection was like, our first dinner together, we were talking about like the deep like pain of infertility, fears and hopes of adoption, and just like you would think we were brothers and sisters like that who had talked about that kind of stuff for years. And it's just when God brings you that community, it's just, and when you're willing to be vulnerable,
I think that's key too.
There's so much strength and beauty that can come out of that.
But they didn't tell us they was pregnant at that time.
Oh, gosh.
That's the one thing they didn't tell us.
We were like 5 weeks, still expecting to miscarry.
There's one thing we don't bring up at this conference.
Hi, we're pregnant.
Not ironically, but you were really nauseous.
I was pounding those snacks.
And
to keep
Jenna was eating a bag of Sun Chips every hour.
The adoption agency was very kind and had tons of snacks everywhere. And I'm like, wow, they really like the snacks around.
She's a hungry girl.
I fit right in,
He's always eating like a pregnant person.
If it's available.
Right. Yes. Oh, wow.
Oh, cool. Well, I guess before we go, I would say, is there any encouragement that you would offer to people maybe dealing with miscarriage or similar situations that you think you could offer up now, or you would want to say?
You go first. Men need to hear more.
I'd say, kind of what we talked about with supporting your spouse. Just know that the journey of grief it's not, healing doesn't happen in a linear line, right? It's the trend might be that direction, but there are days where it's better, and then 3 days later it could be really bad. Just living in an understanding way, showing grace to your spouse, forging that path forward, praying with them. It doesn't take a lot, but it does take intentionality, and there's some discipline there, and hopefully you can build on things that you've already done in your marriage and conversations you've already had. But a little bit in the right places goes a long way to supporting the people in your life that are going through this. And then also, if it's someone really close to you, being gracious in those moments that are difficult, knowing your life is going to be a little bit different for a season. You might have to sacrifice some things that you enjoy and that you want in order to help your spouse heal through that process, but it will be worth it.
I think for a while I didn't think anything good would come out of miscarriages. I was too close and short-sighted to see, but the first thing was just that God had given me a very large avenue of ministry and women I could minister to. It's one of the number one ways that I've been able just to share my testimony of what God's done in my life, not having a biological, just what God's taught me in life of the sanctification process too. And so I think when you were talking about how grief isn't linear, and something I heard, I think it was after the third, maybe the fourth, but it was just that grief and gratitude can coexist. And I experienced that a little bit more even after I had our son, because I grieved the 4 losses in like a new way, because I then was experiencing God was letting me hold our child, be it adopted or biological. I think I would have had the same feeling. God was letting us hold our child, and I was like, so this is what I missed out on. But it really like it almost came full circle. But just it didn't diminish our gratitude of the miracle of our son. But just that grief and gratitude can coexist. And when it comes to just supporting people, I mean, I don't really think I can add anything on top of what you said of just being willing to be there, being willing to be vulnerable. And if they need to cry, or if they need to scream, or if they need to actually, if they are able to see the light, just follow their lead and be a source of just comfort and strength. So,
you got anything to add, Emily?
Just one last thing. I know that you've mentioned before to me that women who have since, had miscarriages, like, have really reached out to you. And, like, you've been able to be there for them and pray with them and hold their hand. And even, like, knowing what's going on, like, with their body when they've miscarried. And I was just thinking where otherwise, if you had not been there, maybe they would have went through it alone, or maybe they wouldn't have reached out to you. But you've been able to sit with them in that spot because you have been there. And sometimes we have to go through hard things, to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, and like it's a privilege that so many women have let me into, like, the darkest, bloodiest, hardest parts of their life. But also, that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't have been through those moments either. And just like the support that you both are able to offer people is a different support that we can't offer. Like, yes, we've both been through infertility, but in different ways, different pains, different lies that you tell yourself. And, just that there's just, if you are willing to be the hands and feet of Jesus to each other, God can really use it.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, we thank you for all of y'all's wisdom and your vulnerability. And
thanks for sharing your story and being vulnerable in that, because those are hard things and some pretty low moments. But,
thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for you guys. We love and respect you lots. So.
I love you guys too.
I guess we'll call it with that then. Until next time.
Bye.
Y'all gotta say bye too.
Bye.
See ya. Signing off.